When people hear the word philosophy, they often think of philosophers. Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, Confucius, Nagarjuna, Simone de Beauvoir, Hannah Arendt. They think of schools of thought: Platonism, Aristotelianism, Stoicism, empiricism, idealism, pragmatism, phenomenology, existentialism, analytic philosophy, critical theory, post-structuralism. And this is understandable. For much of history, philosophy has been presented through its great thinkers, its historical periods, and its competing schools. But philosophical intelligence begins with a different question. Not only, what did philosophers think? But how can philosophical reasoning help us interpret complex human systems today? Philosophical intelligence is not simply another doctrine inside the history of philosophy. It is not a new metaphysical system claiming to replace Plato, Aristotle, Kant, or Heidegger. It is not a belief system. It is not a personal worldview. It is not a motivational philosophy. It is not philosophy as lifestyle branding. Philosophical intelligence is better understood as an applied interpretive discipline. It asks, what kind of problem are we facing? What meanings are active? What identities are under pressure? What narratives are shaping perception? What does fairness require? Where is legitimacy breaking down? What forms of action are admissible? This does not mean philosophical intelligence rejects traditional philosophy. Quite the opposite. PII exists because traditional philosophy matters more than ever. Modern organizations, governments, technologies, and societies face problems that cannot be solved by data alone. They involve meaning, identity, trust, fairness, legitimacy, symbolic conflict, human experience. These are philosophical structures. A policy can be technically correct and still fail because people experience it as unfair. A transformation program can be rational and still collapse because it threatens identity. An AI system can be efficient and still lose legitimacy because people do not trust the authority behind it. A public reform can be evidence-based and still fail because its narrative does not make sense to the people affected. This is why PII treats philosophy not as ornament, but as infrastructure. What Dissonant Kinergy asks, what exists? What kind of thing is this? What are its categories, boundaries, and relations? In classical philosophy, ontology concerns being. In philosophical intelligence, ontology becomes operational. The question becomes, what kind of problem is this? Is this a technical problem, a knowledge problem, a fairness problem, an identity disruption, a narrative fracture, a legitimacy breakdown, a symbolic conflict, a lived experience problem? This is one of the central moves of PII. It brings ontology into practice because many failures begin when the wrong kind of problem is named. A legitimacy crisis is treated as a communication issue. An identity threat is treated as resistance. A moral injury is treated as a performance gap. A narrative breakdown is treated as poor messaging. Once the problem is misclassified, the wrong tools follow. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy concerned with knowledge. How do we know? What counts as evidence? What makes a belief justified? What are the limits of certainty? In modern institutions, epistemology appear everywhere, in public policy, in science communication, in AI governance, in risk management, in consulting, in organizational transformation. A system may have data, but not trust. Evidence may exist, but not legitimacy. Experts may be correct, but not believed. Stakeholders may reject a conclusion because they reject the process that produced it. Philosophical intelligence does not ask only, what does the data say? It also asks, who trusts the data? Who produced it? What assumptions shaped it? What forms of knowledge have been excluded? What uncertainties remain? What epistemic conflict is active? Here, PII draws from epistemology, but translates it into governance, consulting, AI, and institutional practice.
Ethics is one of the most visible links between traditional philosophy and philosophical intelligence. Traditional ethics asks, what is good? What is right? What duties do we have? What consequences matter? What kind of person should we become? What does justice require? Philosophical intelligence asks those questions inside real systems: who carries the burden, who receives the benefit, who is recognized, who is ignored, what harms are being normalized, what actions are not merely possible, but admissible. This matters because modern systems often hide moral questions behind technical language. A budget cut becomes efficiency. A service failure becomes optimization. A displaced community becomes managed transition. A governance failure becomes stakeholder engagement. PII restores the ethical structure beneath the language. It asks whether the action can be justified morally, procedurally, culturally, and politically. Phenomenology studies lived experience. It asks, what is it like to be inside this world? How is the situation experienced? What appears meaningful, threatening, dignifying, humiliating, or overwhelming? This is essential to philosophical intelligence, because systems are not only structures on paper, they are lived from the inside. A hospital is not only a service delivery system, it is also fear, waiting, trust, vulnerability, and care. A school is not only an institution, it is belonging, formation, aspiration, and identity. A workplace is not only an operating model, it is recognition, status, anxiety, loyalty, and purpose. A government process is not only procedure, it is how authority is experienced. PII brings phenomenology into applied analysis, not as therapy, not as sentimentality, but as disciplined attention to lived reality. Political philosophy asks, what makes authority legitimate? What is justice? What is freedom? What do citizens owe institutions? What do institutions owe citizens? When is power justified? Philosophical intelligence carries these questions into governance practice. It distinguishes power from legitimacy. A system may have power and still lack legitimacy. A decision may be legal and still be experienced as unjust. A reform may follow procedure and still fail because people do not recognize its moral authority. This is especially important in public policy, governance, crisis management, and AI regulation. PII therefore asks, what legitimates the decision? Who recognizes the authority? What fairness burdens are imposed? What narratives support or undermine trust? What identities are included or excluded? What would make this action admissible? This is not abstract political theory.
It is political philosophy applied to real institutional life. Philosophy of language asks how meaning works. Semiotics asks how signs, symbols, metaphors, and narratives shape interpretation. PII treats this as central because human beings do not only respond to facts, they respond to what facts mean. The same word can stabilize one group and threaten another. Reform can mean improvement. It can also mean loss. Efficiency can mean competence. It can also mean abandonment. Security can mean protection. It can also mean control. Progress can mean hope. It can also mean erasure. Philosophical intelligence therefore studies narrative and symbolic fields. It asks, what story is being told? Who is cast as the problem? Who is cast as the hero? What symbols are carrying emotional charge? Where is narrative collapse beginning? Existential philosophy asks what it means to live as a human being under freedom, anxiety, mortality, responsibility, and uncertainty. Philosophical intelligence does not become existentialism, but it learns from existentialism. It recognizes that human systems are never only rational systems, they are meaning systems. People ask, who am I in this change? What is being asked of me? What future am I being moved into? Am I being recognized? Am I being erased? Is this still my organization, my community, my country, my role? This is why identity is central to PII. Transformation fails when it changes structures without interpreting identity. People do not resist change only because they dislike novelty. They resist when the change threatens continuity, dignity, belonging, or meaning. PII translates this into identity, reasoning, and transformation diagnostics.
Pragmatism is one of the closest philosophical relatives of philosophical intelligence. Pragmatism asks how ideas work in practice, what consequences follow, what problems does the idea solve, how does thought guide action. PII shares this practical orientation, but it adds a more structured interpretive architecture before action. PII insists on interpretation before intervention, classification before solution, legitimacy before transformation, identity and alignment. This is why one of the central PII sequences is interpretation, judgment, action. We first interpret the meaning structure. Then we make a judgment about what is true, fair, legitimate, and admissible. Only then do we act. Analytic philosophy is known for conceptual clarity. It asks, what exactly do we mean? Is the argument valid? Are the categories clear? Are we using words consistently? Where is the contradiction? PII draws strongly from this tradition. Because many organizational and political failures begin with unclear concepts. A leader says transformation, but means cost reduction. A government says consultation, but means notification. A company says purpose, but means branding. A reform says fairness, but distributes burden unequally. Philosophical intelligence therefore asks whether a concept is clear, coherent, bounded, operationally usable, and ethically honest in this way. Analytic philosophy becomes practical, not as academic wordplay, but as protection against confusion, manipulation, and drift. Critical theory studies power, domination, ideology, social reproduction, and the hidden structures that shape what societies consider normal. PII does not simply become critical theory, but it augurs a disciplined concern for power. Every system distributes benefits and burdens. Every institution makes some realities visible and others invisible. Every narrative protects some interest and exposes others. Every governance structure decides who gets voice, who gets recognition, and who must absorb the cost. Philosophical intelligence asks, where is power operating? Where is legitimacy claimed? Where is moral burden shifted? Where does the language of neutrality conceal asymmetry? Where does technical procedure hide ethical consequence? This allows PII to analyze power without reducing everything to power. That distinction matters. PII treats power as one layer in a broader architecture of meaning, identity, narrative, fairness, legitimacy, and lived experience. Many philosophy channels focus heavily on the Western canon, but philosophical intelligence must operate globally. Human meaning systems are not identical across civilizations. Different traditions understand personhood, authority, time, duty, harmony, freedom, law, community, and moral order differently. Confucian traditions emphasize harmony, hierarchy, duty, and relational stability. Indic traditions often place human life within broader cosmological and metaphysical horizons. Islamic traditions connect law, moral life, and divine order. Western liberal traditions emphasize individual rights, reason, consent, and procedural legitimacy. Indigenous and Pacific traditions often foreground relationality, land, ancestry, collective identity, and continuity. PII studies these differences not as museum objects, but as living meaning systems. Each philosophical tradition gives philosophical intelligence something important. Ontology gives problem classification. Epistemology gives knowledge discipline. Ethics gives moral judgment. Phenomenology gives lived experience. Political philosophy gives legitimacy. Semiotics gives meaning and symbolism. Analytic philosophy gives conceptual precision. Pragmatism gives action, orientation. Existentialism gives identity under pressure. Critical theory gives sensitivity to power and burden. Civilizational philosophy gives global interpretation. PII does not erase these traditions. It organizes their insights into a usable discipline.
So what makes philosophical intelligence different? First, it is integrative, does not belong to one school only. It draws from many philosophical traditions and brings them into one interpretive architecture. Second, it is diagnostic. It asks what is happening beneath the surface of behavior, policy, conflict, technology, or organizational change. Third, it is operational. It provides tools, worksheets, canvases, rubrics, workshops, and practitioner methods. Fourth, it is ethical. It treats interpretation as a responsibility. To interpret a person, organization, or community is not neutral. It can dignify or diminish. It can stabilize or escalate. It can clarify or impose. This is why PII includes practitioner standards, ethics, stop conditions, field conduct, and professional boundaries. There is nothing wrong with studying philosophy historically. The history of philosophy is indispensable. We need Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Spinoza, Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, Arendt, Confucius,
Buddhist philosophy, Islamic philosophy, African philosophy, indigenous philosophy. But philosophical intelligence asks a further question. After we have studied them, what capacity have we built? Can we diagnose a legitimacy crisis? Can we recognize an identity threat? Can we distinguish technical failure from narrative collapse? Can we identify when a system is morally overburdened? Can we interpret lived experience inside an institution? Can we act without violating meaning, dignity, or admissibility? PII therefore shifts philosophy from historical knowledge to interpretive capability. Imagine a government announces a major reform. A technical lens asks, will it work? An economic lens asks, what will it cost? A political lens asks, who supports it? A legal lens asks, is it authorized? All of these questions matter, but philosophical intelligence asks deeper questions as well. Ontology. What kind of problem is the reform actually addressing? Epistemology. What knowledge has been used and what knowledge has been excluded? Ethics. Who carries the burden? Phenomenology. What does this feel like to those affected? Narrative. What story does the reform tell? Identity. Who is being changed by this? Why should people accept the authority behind it? Admissibility. What forms of action are justified? This is the difference. PII does not replace technical analysis. It reveals what technical analysis usually misses. The 21st century is not short of information, it is short of interpretation. We have more data than ever, but less shared meaning, more systems, but less legitimacy, more communication, but more narrative conflict, more technology, but more ethical uncertainty, more speed, but less reflection. This is the environment in which philosophical intelligence becomes necessary. It gives philosophy a new professional role, not as academic commentary from outside the world, but as disciplined interpretation inside the world, inside organizations, inside governments, inside AI systems, inside public debates, inside cultural conflict, inside transformation, inside governance. This is philosophy made operational. So how does philosophical intelligence relate to other schools of philosophy? It is not their replacement. It is not their rival. It is not a simplified version of them. It is an applied meta-discipline that learns from them, organizes them, and brings their power into practice. From ontology, it learns classification. From epistemology, it learns evidence. From ethics, it learns moral judgment. From phenomenology, it learns lived experience. From political philosophy, it learns legitimacy. From semiotics, it learns meaning. From analytic philosophy, it learns clarity. From pragmatism, it learns action. From existentialism, it learns identity. From critical theory, it learns power. From civilizational philosophy, it learns that meaning is never culturally neutral. Philosophical intelligence is philosophy after it has become usable for the problems of our time. Not philosophy reduced, philosophy operationalized. Not a doctrine, a discipline, not a trend, a framework, not an opinion, a way of seeing deeply so that action can become admissible. Philosophical Intelligence Institute. A discipline, not a trend, a framework, not an opinion.